This is a Ghent Neighborhood Association meeting, and I'm going to be moderating. Candidates are going to be given a certain amount of time. We're going to let the candidates introduce themselves. Alderman Bengel, would you like to go first or second?
However you want me to go.
Your preference?
No preference.
Okay. Then if you'd like to kick us off,
Sure.
please introduce yourself, and then Mr. Prill will let's get through this.
Good evening. I am Sabrina Bengel. I am the current alderman for Ward 1. I know just about everybody in this room. There's a few people I may not know, but just very briefly, born and raised in Harrison, New York, which is a suburb of New York City, Westchester County. I went to East Carolina University, met my husband there. We married. He's a native New Bernian. We came to New Bern in 1980, and I have lived in New Bern since 1980. We started our married life in Riverside, lived there for 16 years. Then we moved into the historic district, lived there for 6 years, and then we moved into what I call the hub of downtown, the downtown business district, where we have lived for the last 20 years. So I'm pretty engrossed in the first, ingrained, whatever you want to call it, into the first ward, lived there all this time. But back in the day, Riverside was the 5th ward, and New Bern has really changed over the years. It is the most diverse ward in my estimation. It encompasses the downtown business, downtown historic district, Riverside, Sunnyside, Ghent, Trolley Run, Colonial Heights, and the Center Avenue, Griffin Avenue, that area, Noose, and Trent, that area over there. I don't know that it has a neighborhood name like Colonial Heights does. It also encompasses Trent Court, Walt Bellamy neighborhood, plus the towers. It is also part of Duffy Field from West Street towards George Street and that area. And then there's a small piece in Bridgeton, Riverside Drive, over on that side. So as you can see, oh, I forgot 2 other parts. Old Town and Hidden Harbor. And down Country Club Road on the side of the Catholic Church, that side of the street is First Ward, all the way down to the Trent Woods City of New Bern border, which is beyond the Catholic Church to Barrier Circle, all in that area. So, horse people, richest people, very diverse, with very diverse needs. It is also the oldest infrastructure in the city of New Bern, which presents problems that a lot of the other wards don't have, because we have some of the oldest, much of the infrastructure in that area is 100 to 150 years old. So it does present a lot of problems. I've enjoyed my time serving. I served 1 term from 2009 to 2013, and then I was elected again in 2017, currently now. I would like to serve again. I probably have the widest, deepest knowledge of this city. I know how to get things done. I get things done. My record proves it. My record shows it. Understanding that in many places, sometimes you can't get things done doesn't mean that you haven't tried, you haven't gone out there. But I really do feel my knowledge, my passion, my expertise in this city would serve the citizens well for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alderman Bengel. Mr. Prill.
Good evening. My name is Rick Prill. I am candidate for Alderman in Ward 1. My wife and I moved to New Bern in 2015, and my background, I come out of 30 years as a city manager working in communities both in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. During that 30 years, I worked the trenches in city operations, managing the day-to-day affairs of local governments. So I know local government, I understand local government, I know what local government is supposed to be, and that knowledge and experience can be put to very good use at New Bern. I opted to get into this race primarily to give the voters of Ward 1 a choice. Prior to making that decision, and even reinforced significantly during the campaign for the primary, there's a strong sentiment amongst the voters for change. If you're happy with the way things have been running over the last few years, then you know how to vote. And I guarantee that you'll get what you vote for the next 3 years. If, however, you're looking for an opportunity to change things, then I'm a viable candidate to help make that happen. By myself, I can't do it. I would be working with the other 6 members of the board to try to achieve change, to make sure that local government is running the way it should be, that it would be much more transparent than it is today, and that it would be conducting itself in a much more professional manner than I think it's being done today. So with that, I am going to let the questions be asked, and we will respond to them.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the first question to get us rolling. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, there's a blue line here. I'm going to ask everybody to, if you do have a question, please line up in a orderly fashion on this side, all right? Mr. Prill, we're going to start. We're going to try to go back and forth on who starts answering these questions when they're general for both of you. So the question that I have to start us off is, what are the top issues facing the city of New Bern, and particularly the residents of Ward 1, in the next 3.5 years?
As I just mentioned, one of the recurring themes that I've been hearing as I've had an opportunity to talk to Ward 1 residents is a feeling that there's just a lack of transparency on decisions that are being made by the board. Those decisions are not being discussed and gaining the input of each of you before the decision is made. There seems to be a mindset amongst the current board that we know what's best for the community, we're going to make the decision, and then we will let the community know what that decision is. That's not an appropriate way for local government or any level of government to be conducting itself. That's an issue that I think needs to be addressed by the new board and can be addressed by the new board. Recent events have also, I think, highlighted concerns in the community. Recent events primarily being the Kessler collection. I'm tempted to say it was a debacle. You might not agree with that reference, but it does highlight the fact that a lot of discussions were being held behind closed doors. There wasn't any presentation made to the community about what the Kessler collection was looking to try to achieve in New Bern. It was a decision that had been made and a bombshell basically being dropped on the community as to this is what we are going to do. Without any preface at all, without any discussion at all, without any input from any of you.
Thank you, Mr. Prill. Alderwoman Bengel, the question is, what are the top issues facing the city and the residents of Ward 1 in the next 4 years?
Thank you. I will answer that question. My belief is that the top issues facing is stronger, safer neighborhoods. We must, those are important to all citizens, whether you're in a business district or you're in a residential district. The next top priority is affordable housing. That is a must in our community. We cannot attract jobs, we cannot grow our city, grow our tax base without housing and without affordable housing in many different areas. I've worked very hard in forming the redevelopment commission so we could look at the 5 Point, Stuffyfield, Walt Bellamy neighborhoods that are desperate for redevelopment. and I've worked very hard, and the process has been painstakingly slow, but I've worked very hard in bringing that all to light. So housing is important. It's the essence of what makes a community, is good housing stock that's affordable and working in our minority community. So that is a priority for me. I think it's important, and I think that's what we need to look at. We need to look at keeping and growing our tax base. In 2023, we will have reevaluation. Currently, our tax rate is 0.4822, lowest tax rate east of I-95. But in 23, it will be reevaluated. What have the property values done in this past year or two? Skyrocketed. So that could have an impact on the taxes you're paying. So we're gonna have to work, and I commit to working to revenue neutral to keep your taxes. So at 48 cents, you know, depending on what the tax values do, revenue neutral means if we take in 13 or 14 $1 million in revenue, ad valorem taxes, we need to get that same amount, but by a lower tax rate, but because the values are going to go up. So I'm going to commit to work that. That is an important thing that's coming up, and that's understanding and knowing. I don't know how you want me to do rebuttal. Are you going to save that for later on, or how would you like me to handle it?
You've got a minute and a half.
Happy to do rebuttal on some of what. Is that okay?
Oh, I'm sorry. Nope.
Okay.
We'll let Mr. Prill do a minute of rebuttal, and then I'll give you another minute of rebuttal, all right?
Okay, sounds good. So am I done with my time?
We're going to pause you there, all right?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Prill, you want to respond to that? We're going to give you a minute to respond to that, okay?
I'm sorry?
We're going to give you 1 minute to respond to that, please.
That's fine. You heard my esteemed colleague talk about housing as being a priority of hers for the upcoming 3 years. Where has that priority been for the last 10 years, for the last 15 years? It's easy to say that housing is a priority. What have you seen happen in the community over the last decade or more of new housing? You haven't seen much. So is it really a priority, or is it just a good talking point? I'll leave that for you to decide.
It's not a talking point, it's reality. So let me tell you about housing and working. For the last 40 years, I have heard that change was coming to 5 Points, and I can show you pictures from 1976 of Commissioner Sampson standing in the middle of 5 Points saying change is coming. And we hadn't seen it. That's why I was committed to forming the Redevelopment Commission and making changes in our housing authority. We have real issues at the New Bern Housing Authority. And I have worked very hard in the last 2 terms that I've been in trying to desperately make the changes. We had poor leadership. We tried to put better leadership in. It's not been easy. And then what do? We have a 500-year flood. And half of Trent Court, 108 units get wiped out. And they're still standing. Why? Because we still can't get the proper paperwork filled out by the Housing Authority, which isn't run by the city of New Bern. All the mayor does is appoint. And so I stayed every minute, every meeting, I'm constantly on it. So housing is a reality, and it's what we need to do.
Next question, and I'm going to start with Alderman Bengel on this one, and I'm going to do 3 minutes. All right, I wasn't particularly clear on the last one.
That's okay.
We're going to do 3 minutes. With the rising cost of everything, including especially public employees, how can the city avoid raising taxes on the residents of Ward 1?
So it's always been my opinion that you expand the tax base. And that's how we can keep costs, because we require services. Municipalities provide services. We provide quality of life, parks and rec, water, sewer, electric. That's the quality of life issues that we deal with. We do not deal with the social issues. That's the county level, and that's the partisan level that deals with that. We are a non-partisan board, and we deal with quality of life issues. So in order to keep providing the services that our citizens want, which are parks and rec, and safety, police, better police protection, fire protection, all these costs are going up. All we hear is that we can't keep good policemen in our city because we need to pay more and we need to put more salary in there. The cost of our employees continues to rise, and we should put employees across the nation are experience this, employers in having to pay more for their people. So it's important that we grow the tax base and widen that tax base in order to get more funds instead of widening the tax. Do we need to be vigilant on what we're spending as well? Absolutely. Where we can pay cash, we have paid cash in the years that I've been on the board. Where we can use debt service, and we have used a lot of debt service. Our elevator, we're using debt service, but we were able, thank God we got in before this mess happened, but we can borrow money at 2%, and it made good financial sense to do that, to put an elevator in City Hall so that we can allow disabled people and elderly people into the People's House to get to the city, to get to City Hall and up in our courtroom. I felt very, very strongly in spending that money. I also voted to spend the money for Stanley White Recreation Center because that building needs to be built. We are now, what, 4 years post Florence, and it's going to be another year before we build that. So it's important to spend the money, whatever it took, to get that building up and going. I'm proud of the work that I've done. I'm proud of the leadership that I've done. And again, expanding our tax base, trying to bring in more revenue sources so we can keep property taxes low and provide the services that the public wants. Thank you.
Mr. Prill, when you're ready.
Yes, could you just repeat that question?
The question is, with the rising costs of essentially everything, but including particularly public employees, how can the city avoid raising taxes on the residents of Ward 1?
The reality is you probably can't. I think all of you are intelligent enough to realize that taxes need to go up. I'm not talking about huge tax increases, but just incremental increases to try to keep pace with the cost of goods, the cost of services, the cost of everything that a local government has to deal with. In too many communities that I worked in, the elected officials, as well-meaning as most of them were, kept repeating the same line. Oh, we gotta hold the line on taxes. We gotta hold the line on taxes. Can't let that tax rate go up. But the reality, the impact of that is that local government then has less money to provide the services that are needed to the community. So the service level begins to decrease if you don't incrementally increase that tax rate to keep pace. With inflation being what it is, it's a tremendous challenge. Local government, the board, the senior management level, the department heads, they need to be taking a laser-focused look at the services they provide to see where they can hold the line on expenditures and focus the resources, the financial resources that they have in those areas that are going to provide the greatest impact to the community. I appreciate Sabrina bringing up the issue of the elevator at City Hall, and I know she's been a proponent of getting that built for a number of years. The absolute worst time for that project to be approved is right now, given what the costs are going to be. Why couldn't the board have taken a little different tact and said, yes, it's important to have this, however, we can move our meetings to other locations in the community. We don't have to spend $3 million, $4 million, whatever the final price tag is going to be. We could take that money and put it where it's probably going to serve the community better than building an elevator and maybe expanding some office space and bathroom space at City Hall. The mayor and board can meet elsewhere in the community. Yes, there are some logistical issues that would have been involved in doing that, but the cost would have been minimal as opposed to spending $3 to $4 million on an elevator. So it's an example as to, was that the best decision that could have been made, or was that just, we had the money available, so we're going to spend it on this? I think there are a lot of services in the community that money could have gone for better use. Talk about housing previously, that money could potentially have been used for housing purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Prill. Would you like a minute for rebuttal?
Sure. The first thing I'd like to say, this is why we need business people at City Hall. I appreciate the perspective, but if you can run a city like a business, you have to understand the economics of what you pay your people, how much money you're taking in, what's your bottom line. It's important to have business people looking at what we're spending in city government. So I disagree that we can find the money to do these services. We have in the past, we know how to do it. You just have to be smart and look at it, how you're spending money, how you're paying back debt, your cost ratios. So it's important that we put some business people. I think you should have a mixture, and I think that's why the first ward needs a business person. As far as the elevator, how do I tell a young man who wants to be involved in city government that he can't come in our building to talk to the city manager or to do any other business because he's in a wheelchair and he can't get in our building? And I talked to Miss Sampson, almost 90 years old, who comes to all of our meetings and can barely get up the stairs, but gets up there because she wants to participate. And I will tell you that that building is the iconic symbol of this community. Every time you see New Bern, what do you see? The clock tower. That is the home of the city of New Bern. Our citizens, it belongs to the citizens, and we should have our meetings there at all times, except when we need to do workshops on the road.
Thank you. Mr. Prill, you have a minute for rebuttal if you'd like.
Well, not to belabor the point about this elevator, we could beat that to death. I mean, the decision's been made, the project is moving forward, and it's not going to stop. Will it be, a valuable addition to the building? Yes. Is City Hall an iconic building? Yeah. Is it the best location for City Hall? Probably not, if you think about it. There is absolutely no reason why the city and the county could not be looking at potentially a joint facility somewhere else in New Bern that could service both governmental levels. You could pull in private enterprise as a part of that, quasi-governmental agencies to be a part of that. It's just a thought. We don't have to have City Hall at that building, in a building that is not designed to be a city hall.
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question, please do. Is it directed to both alderpersons or
I think it's mostly directed to
Alderman Bengel?
Alderman Bengel, but for further comment.
Is it cumbersome? Then we're going to ask Ms. Bengel to answer the question first, and we're going to give you 3 minutes, and then Mr. Prill, you're going to have 3 minutes to respond. Okay?
You said that a goal would be to grow the tax base, okay? Rather than raise the tax rate, grow the tax base. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Good. Tell me how.
Yes, we'll be happy to. That would be by bringing in new industry, and it would be taking properties. We're currently involved in, you've probably seen around town, large signs, we're city-owned property that we have that is bringing zero into the tax rolls. We're selling these properties now for some development. It would be development of new housing and expansion. We're seeing some apartments go up. We've got some affordable housing that has gone up in the community on 3rd Avenue. There's one on Carolina Avenue. There's one on Karen Drive. So those are new tax bases coming in. You know, the growth a few years ago of Harris Teeter, that is new development, new growth. Across the street next to Aldi, we've looked at some plans where there's going to be some building going on there. There's going to be some building on the corner of, I think it's Martin Luther King and where the cemetery is. That is all expanding our tax base because that's going to bring additional revenue into the city. That brings more dollars, meaning we have more dollars to work with so we don't have to raise taxes to pay for those services. Thank you.
Mr. Prill.
Alderman Bengel and I do agree that new growth, new development in the community is very important. I think you've all probably seen communities who are trying desperately to attract new development, whether that be residential, commercial, industrial, sometimes with success, other times not. But there needs to be growth in a community, but it needs to be smart growth. Communities need to have a master plan. I believe that, I know for a fact, New Bern does have a number of plans that have been developed over the years, and if you haven't seen them, they're available online. You know, they're interesting read. I mean, to some of us, they're an interesting read. I believe, though, that the city is past due on working on a new master plan. So the growth that happens in a community needs to be in line with, a plan that, in a broad sense, identifies areas and segments of the community that would be good areas for certain types of development. I mean, you don't want industrial in the downtown area. You do want business, you do want residential properties in the downtown business area. So in a very simple way, a master plan is just looking forward, looking at the community as a whole, and trying to identify where different growth patterns would be beneficial for the community. I'm not sure New Bern has been proactive in going out and seeking new development. Typically, that would be the responsibility of the Developmental Services Office, either the director or a city planner. I may be wrong, and please correct me if I am, that we should have an individual in the city that is proactively out in the marketplace, trying to identify businesses that might flourish in New Bern, talking to residential builders, marketing the city. The growth is important, as Sabrina has mentioned. It helps to stabilize the tax rate. But please don't, how should I say this? I'm going to go back to the incremental tax rate. Taxes, unless you have tremendous development happening, your taxes are not going to go down. Or unless you want less services provided, your taxes are not going to go down.
Thank you, Mr. Prill. Alderman Bengel, you have a minute for rebuttal.
Yeah, just a clarification. We do have someone that works in that area of attracting business and industry and what have you. So there's an organization called the C1A, Craven 100 Alliance. It's led by Jeff Wood, who was, when we had a development services director, Jeffrey Jerry, worked in concert with him to attract industry. What you see, the growth, if you haven't been, go out to the industrial park and see the new growth out there. We were able to attract Weyerhaeuser and their development of what's known as West New Bern now. You see the houses going up. All of that is tax base for the city of New Bern. They're going to be building more units. It's coming up very nicely. It's worth a drive out there. So there is somebody that does this full time, is out there looking, bringing people to New Bern, going to trade shows, doing all of that. So that is in place. It's happening, and that's why you've seen the growth that you have seen in our area, because we are working together. Also, too, I have to mention downtown. Downtown, if anybody was here 40 years ago, you knew what downtown, it was abandoned 40 years ago. And I'm lucky to say that I had a part in being able to come in 1983, 84, and purchase a piece of property, which is now my home, to help start the development of New Bern. Many people have just seen it in the last 5 to 10 years and think, God, this is great, but they don't realize where it came from. They don't realize how hard we worked and the many hours we worked with many different groups to make it come together, and that's what we did with economic development in the county as well.
Thank you, Alderman Bengel. Mr. Prill, would you like to rebuttal?
No, that's not.
All right. We're going to move on to our next question.
My name is Trent Ethan. for those who don't know me. My dad once told me that if you don't ring your own bell, nobody's going to ring it for you. So I want to give each of you an opportunity to do that. Ms. Bengel, I would like you to tell us what have you done for New Bern. Understanding that you have not been in government in New Bern, could you tell us what you have done in the localities where you were in government, when you were city manager, when you were city planner, whatever your resume states?
We're going to start. We started with Alderman Bengel last time. We're going to start with Mr. Prill this time. 3 minutes.
And thank you for recognizing that I have not been in a position to be able to answer that question directly. In terms of my role in other communities, I can say with confidence that any of the communities that I've worked in, I've left them a more professional organization than when I started. There are best practices that can be implemented across the board in local government. These are best practices addressing the provision of services, personnel-related issues, decision-making processes, how a planning and zoning commission operates when they're reviewing proposals from developers. So across the board, you have best practices. I've got some concerns about how New Bern has operated its local government over the years. One of those concerns has to do with their recruitment process, trying to attract the best candidates that the city can attract for senior management level positions. Our current city manager, the previous city manager, were not trained, did not have experience as city managers, but they have found themselves being appointed to that position. And that's not to disparage them. I'm sure each of them has some skill sets that are very valuable. But lacking the experience as a city manager, which is the position that runs the day-to-day operation of this multi-million-dollar organization. Sabrina talks about taking a business perspective. Local government is not a business. We don't sell widgets. We don't build widgets. We provide services. These are quality of life services at the most basic level of government that we can provide. We need to have our senior management people with experience from other communities on implementing these best practices. And I don't think we're getting that, not to the extent that we should be. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, I appreciate your comments, Mr. Prill, because I think this is almost an unfair question because I'm here, I'm living it, I'm working it, and I have been very active in my work. Of course, came into office this term, and our dear friend Greg Smith died within 6 weeks of me taking office, and it really impacted me. I'm going to be honest with you, it was probably the hardest blow that I've ever had, because I actually was there the morning that he passed, and it was not a good way to start my term. We came from there, and then 9 months later we had a 500-year flood. So I will tell you that from the minute we knew we were going to be in this state, I was on radio, TV, you name it, working on behalf of all of you to get the information out, to tell you what we needed to do. And then the minute it was safe for me to go out, I was out at 6 o'clock in the morning in the streets trying to see what we could do to help our friends and neighbors. Alderman Barbara Best, I will say this, she got stuck not being able to fly in. She was out of town, couldn't get back, and I ended up helping a lot of her citizens. I spent some time over on Oaks Road, which was devastated in that area, trying to assist. Beyond that, the CARES group formed, which was a group of citizens who felt they just needed more information. Did I think we did a really good job on answering their questions? No, I've never been through a 500-year flood. None of the aldermen had. We did the best with what we could do. But what we did is we found resources to get a resiliency plan in place. A study was done, a plan was done, and I helped to lead those efforts because it's important that we know what we've done in the past and we protect ourselves for the future. I've started the redevelopment commission. Everybody knows about that. I've spoke to that. It's important. We need to move forward in doing that. I worked with the Omega Center. Omega Center was a decaying building, not being used. Worked with them to get it renovated and put back together so it could be used as a program space because the Stanley White Recreation Center was gone and we needed some space for our young people and other in that area, a community gathering place for others. I'm happy to have done with that. I've worked with the Housing Authority. I've led the effort to get the city to donate their property to RCS. That was the original RCS building, which they were leasing. I got them to donate it to them because of all the good work we're doing, and I think it's important. I did lead the effort. When I came into office, there was lots of controversy about Airbnb. And I did lead the effort and worked to try to make zoning and change zoning so that we knew we couldn't stop Airbnb, but we knew we could somewhat control it and make it better for the residents. I believe in strong residential neighborhoods, and I believe that when people live in residential neighborhoods, they should know who their neighbors are. So I've done that. I've given voice to many things. I've never voted for a tax increase. I've been available in returning calls, texts, and emails in a timely manner, and I've continued to work to make New Bern economically viable. But I've put my heart and soul in this. I think it's evident to you all tonight that I've put my heart and soul in this, and I'm your best candidate. Thank you.
Well, I'm Nancy Hill. I live here in Ghent. Sabrina, you just answered the question I was going to ask both of you. So, Mr. Prill, I would like to ask you, what is your position on short-term rentals, in particular the Airbnb concept?
3 minutes, Mr. Prince.
Thank you for asking that. My wife and I actually lived that process. After we moved to New Bern, we made a decision, once we got our house fixed up to a level that would be acceptable, we made the decision to open our home up to visitors to New Bern as an Airbnb. We are a little bit different when we were doing it. We're not doing it now. But when we decided to do that, our living arrangement was a little bit out of the ordinary, and we disclosed this right up front. That this is our home. We live in our home. If you want to stay in our home, you're basically coming to spend time with your favorite aunt. If you're living in the same space that we live in. So we're bumping into each other in the morning and throughout the day. We had some absolutely wonderful visitors stay in our home. Almost too many sometimes. It got to be a bit of a chore for us. It was a wonderful experience. We were not causing any degradation in any way to our community or to our particular neighborhood. And yet, a former alderman, based on a couple of complaints from neighbors, unfounded complaints, by the way, a former alderman took it upon himself to try to shut down Airbnbs in Ward 1. Not the rest of the community, but just in Ward 1. Long and short of that process is we were advised by the city to go through the process of becoming a B&B. So we went through that process. And we became a B&B. We didn't operate as a B&B, we continued to operate as an Airbnb. At a later date, Alderman Bengel convinced enough of the board members to put a pause on Airbnb short-term rentals in the community. Although I don't think that pause applied to the downtown area, where a certain alderman has rental units available, and we're renting them out. But that being aside, I don't have a problem with Airbnbs as long as the city's code is being adhered to in terms of parking, in terms of any kind of noise ordinance. We have visitors. We rely on visitors coming to Newburgh. A lot of those visitors want a different living experience as, you know, of a hotel. They want to come into the historic districts and experience that. We provided that successfully without impact to the neighborhood.
Alderman Bengel, you have 3 minutes.
You know, Airbnbs, and he's correct in that, you know, Mr. Prill actually came to me when I first got elected to talk about it, because it was an issue. I had neighbors complaining about parking. Parking was a real issue, especially on the streets in downtown, where not very many people have driveways, so they park on the street. So when you're having guests in your house, it made for a bad situation. And excuse me, Mr. Prill, but my memory is a little foggy. I don't remember about a pause. I know we studied it. We wanted to study it, and that's what we did. We formed a committee. Ms. Ann Shout was the chair of that committee, and there were several residents. I believe Mrs. Prill was on that committee. And we worked for about, I want to say, 8 or 9 months and reviewing everything and looking at it, and we came up with a policy that we felt so that people across our city could have Airbnbs, because legally we believed we could not stop them. But we wanted to make sure we were maintaining quality of life again. So therefore, you know, the definition of a B&B is only in a commercial zone, so C1, C2. If you want an Airbnb that's in a residential zone, it's called a short-term rental whole house, short-term rental partial house, where you rent rooms versus your whole house. You cannot have them closer than 250 feet apart, because again, we didn't want every house to be an Airbnb. You must have dedicated parking within 600 feet of the house, and it must be off-site or on the property. It cannot be on the street. Again, we were just trying to make rules to be fair to everyone. So by studying it, we looked at it, we worked on it, we felt we had resolution, and that's what we passed. I think it's important. That was the issue. We looked at it. I worked very hard on it to make sure that we found some resolution. And you know, our favorite saying for our city attorney, and he's really right, is you know you're successful when both parties are equally unhappy. So that's how, you know, I knew we were successful. So everybody didn't get everything, but we got something. So great question. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question.
I swear I wrote this before I came to this meeting. Understanding answers will vary because Ms. Bengel is sitting on the board and Mr. Prill is a candidate. In recent months, citizens of Ward 1 and all of Newburgh were confronted by 2 proposed projects, both of which received resounding citizen opposition, specifically the Union Point Park and the Kessler Group and the Social District for open carry alcohol. Ms. Bengel, how would you enhance your methods of communication to prevent or mitigate opposition created by lack of transparency?
Because there are 2 parts to that, it would be better just so that you can tell.
Okay, Mr. Prill, Ward 1 is a vast area, both geographically and demographically. How would you communicate with the many subgroups within Ward 1 as such issues arise? That's what I said.
Okay, oh, I thought they would say.
All right, let's say that those questions are how are you going to communicate to avoid problems in the future? Is that equal to both of them?
I think she wants to address the Union Point and the social districts, I think.
Well, then I'm going to start by addressing your first question to Alderman Bengel, and we'll give Mr. Prill an opportunity to say something about that, and then we'll ask Mr. Prill his question, all right?
The broad topic is communication.
Correct. You know, a matter of interpretation too, because the issue with Union Point Park was a memorandum of understanding, so it was just an MOU. It was not a sale, it was a discussion topic, and it was put before the citizens. The citizens had an opportunity to speak to it. It was non-binding, remember, non-binding. It was a discussion. People said, why would you even discuss it if you knew you weren't going to sell it? Because it was part of a larger package, and I have to listen to all opinions from all sides of the fence. And I think it is my job as the alderman to listen to all the different viewpoints, whatever. The citizens spoke loud and clear. It was obvious. Kessler withdrew, we withdrew, and we're working on one project. They actually withdrew from both the Talbot's lot and from the Union Point, vision that they had. And that's what it was. It was their vision. There was nothing concrete. We never got to that point. And that's why we put it out there, so that people could understand this is what was being asked of us. Second point on the social districts. The social districts were put forward by the Chamber of Commerce, the Tourism Board, or TDA, and Downtown Business. And that never came before the Board of Aldermen. So it was something that they took, they wanted to develop, and they were going to bring to us, but they took it, I guess, out on the road to different groups to have them listen to it, whatever. It's never come before the board. What I saw in its first stages, it was not to my liking, because I didn't like, it was too large an area. I didn't like the connectivity of it. I thought it should be a smaller footprint. I thought the days should be less. But again, it has never come to us, and we were told that now they've taken it off the table. So again, the communication was out there by that group because it was their job to communicate it. If it had come before us, was on our agenda item, again, it would have been put out there for the community to respond to us. I mean, when the Union Point issue was on there, probably got 100 emails as soon as it was put out there. So we saw it, we listened, but a lot of it, unfortunately, just got spun the wrong way. And it was interpreted in a wrong way. So I believe that we should listen to people, we should hear. Everybody has visions all the time. I get visions all the time from people. And we should listen to those visions. It doesn't mean that MOU was not to act on anything, it was not to sell anything, but to have discussion. And that's their vision, and then we would have had to come to brass tacks again with public comment, public debate. And I'll be honest with you, Union Point, that parcel would have been very difficult to develop based on the Secretary of Interior's restriction that's on the deed already. And so I'm sorry, but that is.
That really didn't answer the question.
So
Mr. Prill, excuse me, I'm sorry. We're going to try to stick to the format. We're going to give Mr. Prill an opportunity to respond to that if he'd like, and then we're going to direct your second question to Mr. Prill. I'm going to ask everybody to try to keep it to one question, please. I understand you brought two, and we're going to let you do that. Go ahead, Mr. Prill.
Let me do my best. With regards to Kessler,
Never mind, I'll withdraw. That is not the question I asked. Talked about it, so I withdraw.
Okay, Mr. Prill, if you would like to respond, you can go ahead.
well, let me try. None of us in Ward 1 or throughout the community had an opportunity to hear a presentation either from the Kessler collection or from the mayor and board of aldermen as to what this idea, this vision was all about. I mean, one day there was just an announcement that there was going to be some action taken. You know, an item was put on the agenda. A couple of days later, the board was going to consider taking action on it. You know, an MOU. What's an MOU? Did any of you know what an MOU was? An MOU is not required to have a presentation made. It's not required to have a discussion about a proposed development in the community. So why wasn't there just a vision, a presentation made by somebody as to, we have a developer, or here is a developer, and they would like to present to you a concept for development in the community. We didn't have that opportunity. There was an opportunity at the last minute to react to this agenda item, but that's not giving you the opportunity to understand what this development, the proposed development, was going to entail. Off of that, I think part of the question was, what would I do as Alderman in Ward 1, given the diverse nature of Ward 1? What would I do to try to bring the different neighborhoods and communities of Ward 1 together? My thought that I think would be a workable solution for Ward 1 would be to invite individuals who are recognized leaders in the neighborhoods, the various neighborhoods and historic districts, the downtown business community. Create what I just, for lack of a better term, a residents' council that could meet on a regular basis, once a month, and just have an open forum to talk about issues that these leaders are seeing in their communities. That discussion could then be brought back to the Board of Aldermen by myself. And specific issues then could be passed on to staff to address. So in a very short way, and I can try to expand on it later if I have an opportunity, that's how I would approach trying to bring Ward 1 communities together.
Alderman Bengel, would you like to take a minute for rebuttal?
Well, I'm sorry that the lady, thank you. I'm sorry that the lady thought we didn't answer the question on communication because, you know, I do believe in communication. I'm very good in sending things out when there's information. How I work, because there's so many people, it's really hard to engage every single individual. So I work through the associations. I've worked through Mr. Janess, I've worked through Mr. Cull and other people who have headed up Hydra. There's Trolley Run back there. I have a contact there. I try to have contacts in my different neighborhoods. So what I do is I send out something to them who then in turn sends it out to their membership. And it's just an easier way for me to communicate and to get the information out. We also have to use the public process. And the public process is that once the information gets out there, you have to take some responsibility in understanding what it is and trying to get the information. You can call me, you can text me, and I'm responsive. So I think that is how I communicate. I've been successful in communicating in that way for all these years, and I think that's a good method that I choose.
Thank you. Next question.
First, thank you both for taking time out of your lives to come share with us. My name is Jim Polo, and I have a question about the Municipal Service District, which is downtown in the business district. So what is your understanding of the purpose of the Municipal Service District tax money that is collected, and how should the MSD money be used? Thank you.
Back on Alderman Bengel to start.
Whatever. That's what a good husband's all about. Bring a little bit of water. MSD is the Municipal Service District, and it's something that I have studied and worked with since its inception. It was done in the mid-'80s as a tool to help Main Street communities. So Swiss Mayor brought this to the forefront. It helps Main Street communities in getting additional funds that they can't otherwise get from city government. Because what was happening is downtown was dying. The property owners were saying to the city fathers, please help us. Can't we do something? We want to upgrade. You know, we're worried about bad businesses coming down here. So they used the tool of Municipal Service District, which is a third tax. So we pay city tax, county tax, and municipal service tax. Only property owners pay that in a boundary. The boundary is the Neuse River to Hancock Street, the Trent River to Broad Street. That money has been collected since about the mid-'80s, and it was used to leverage in borrowing money. That's how the streetscapes were done downtown. So all the new sidewalks, the light poles, banners, when you see them flying, those beautiful New Bern banners, all of that was paid through MSD dollars. And over the years, it has been collected, and we currently have, I believe, 3 loans still that we pay on. As they fall off, I mean, we're still paying on the upgraded sidewalk. We have one loan left, and that will go away, but we've used other things for it. In the past years, MSD money was used to buy what we know as the Talbot lot. that was used to purchase it. There were buildings on there, monies were used to take those buildings down. So it wasn't always that pretty green space. It didn't look so good back in the day. We've just recently used funds to buy a piece of land across the street from the farmer's market over there next to the bank in front of Poor Charlie's. We've bought that lot. We hope that it may be the site of the future Pepsi Museum. If we can get PepsiCo back in New Bern, hopefully with COVID being over, they'll be back there. We hope that's going to be the future home. We had looked at potentially Talbot's. We don't think that's going to work for them, but we don't think that's the highest and best use. So that potentially is it. We're not there 100%, but potentially that's what we're looking at. So the MSD dollars have made all the difference in really upgrading downtown and really making it the special place that it is. And I think it's very, very important that we continue it. At the time, it was voluntary by the group. They asked for it to be put in place, and it has continued all these years. And you are enjoying the benefits of what the MSD taxes have provided to downtown.
Mr. Prill. 3 minutes.
Understand that Sabrina has the knowledge, of the MSD that I don't, because she's lived it, she's worked through it. Give credit to those property owners that were willing to take on an additional tax in order to generate money necessary to make critical improvements to the downtown business community. So again, past property owners, current property owners, and future property owners. It's a successful program that New Bern implemented. So again, credit needs to be given where it's due. In terms of how that money should be spent, and I'll defer to Sabrina to explain that, because I don't know the answer, but I get the impression that it's the mayor and board that make the decision on how to spend that money. My own thought, based on your question, James, is do you as a property owner have any input into how that money gets spent? You're the one paying for it. Shouldn't you have at least some level of input into how that money gets spent? And I'm not sure you do, and correct me if I'm wrong.
I can tell you, Rick, I do not.
Okay.
There's no civilian or no property owner oversight or contribution to the use of that money. It is only
Okay,
the owner.
well, again, my own reaction to the question is I think the property owners that are paying that tax should have the means of communicating as a group to the decision makers, the mayor and board, as to how you would like to see that money spent, as opposed to the city collecting the tax and making the decision on how it should be spent, which might not be in line with your thoughts or the thoughts of other property owners in the community. So I think that would be a change that could be made relatively easily. You're not going to agree. I mean, as a property owner, you're going to have ideas that the mayor and board probably, might accept or might not. But you should have a voice in it since you're paying that tax.
Bengel, would you like to take a minute and vote?
Sure. For many years, I'm very loosely organized. I came into it probably in the 90s and got asked to come to a meeting and went to it. It's very loosely put together. There's no structure that says there must be a formalized board or committee. It is up to the mayor and board of aldermen and the spending of those funds. We have had meetings, I'll tell you, prior to COVID. I really tried. I was never the chair because I was the only woman in the group, and I used to get a lot of grief, and finally I became the quote-unquote chair, if you want to call it. I led the way, and I tried to keep minutes. I tried to keep notes. Jim has seen in the past those minutes and agendas, and I tried to put it forward, and then COVID came. And I'm just going to be honest, COVID and just kind of wiped us out. We weren't meeting, we weren't getting together, and we have basically not really done anything except the purchase of the lot. That's the only thing that we've really done with any money so far. We haven't spent it. And I will tell you that I like to be able to speak to some of the larger property owners and just getting some advice. People who have been there a long time, just ask their opinions. And if anybody else has opinion, they certainly can call me. And I would willingly accept those phone calls.
Mr. Prill, did you want to rebut?
No, please move on.
We're going to ask another question.
I'm John Falk. I live on Johnson Street. Sabrina mentioned her role in developing the New Bern Redevelopment Commission. I think we all know that this is vital to the development of New Bern as a whole. As property values in these distressed areas are improved, and the tax base is improved, and tax revenues are increased. As an older person, will you support the redevelopment commission, and do you have any special aspect of the commission you'd like to see achieved?
All right, thank you. We're going to start with Mr. Prill this time.
I certainly don't have any concerns or objections to the redevelopment commission, and I think what they're trying to do. I get the impression, and this is just an impression from me, that they're having some difficulty in getting traction and moving forward. I think there's a level of frustration in the community as to what are they doing. Are they achieving anything? And I'm sure they are. I don't think those achievements are as visible as maybe they could be or should be. Visible in terms of communication to the residents of the community as to what progress is being made. I have no problem supporting the ongoing effort of the redevelopment commission. It certainly is needed in the area that they are focusing on. I think the city over the years probably could have done more in that area than has been done. An example might be just what recently transpired is that the city had money that they received from the federal government. And there was a recent discussion by the board of kind of divvying that money up between the 6 wards. Some of the wards can absolutely use that money. Others probably are going to be scrambling to try to figure out how to use it. So divvying the money up amongst the 6 aldermen might not have been the best way to handle that. I'm sure the staff, if they did not make a recommendation to the mayor and board as to priorities that they feel need to be addressed in the community, that if those recommendations weren't asked for or given, they should have been. So that money could have been possibly targeted more in the redevelopment area as opposed to parts of the community that might not actually need that money for infrastructure repairs or services. Because at this point, I only know that there's a block of money in Ward 2 that's going towards sidewalks. I don't know how the other hundreds of thousands of dollars are going to be spent. I'd rather see that money focused on where there is identified needs in the community to make actual improvements in those areas.
Alderman Bengel.
Well, just to follow up on that, $2 million of those funds, we got $6 million. $2 million of that fund is going to go for stormwater and sewer needs in the redevelopment area because that is a priority. We all agreed as a board that was a priority. Then we agreed to take $350,000 to give to the redevelopment commission for the redevelopment of the McCotter House, which was a drug kingpin house that was confiscated by the feds and given to the city of New Bern. We want to put a health center in that location. It looks like it's going to be taken down the house and a new building will be built, and that's why we committed the $350,000 to build a new building, because the importance of health and wellness in that community is is beyond necessary. That's part of, you know, healthy living and having a home. All of that is in that circle. So the redevelopment commission is so important. But I will tell you that, you know, we have a lot of infrastructure things that have to get settled first. We were lucky enough to get some grants to do some expansion of Biddle Street. If you haven't been back into that area, Biddle Street, it's to get the water out. The problem is Duffy Field's in a bowl, just like this. It's been like this for 100 years. And these people have suffered through flooding and whatever, and it's time that we address these, but we have to address the flooding and the area first. So again, lots of studies being done. We did get some mitigation funds to expand these retention ponds and get a new pump so we can get the water down to Biddle Street. We had probably about 10 or 12 FEMA lots where property was confiscated in the past. People were bought out by FEMA and it's given to the city. We can't do anything with it. It has to remain green space, and we're using it as part of these retention ponds. So that was a good use for that. We're gonna pump the water over to where we have a mitigation area on Simmons Street. So it's a fairly large project. Once we do that, we can move along, and you're gonna see some progress with our redevelopment commission. They're meeting tonight. They had 5 items on their agenda for trying to get things built. They've been acquiring property on First Avenue, so I know it is painstakingly slow, but we are light years ahead than we've been for the past 40 years, I can tell you that. And I'm just very pleased to see the motion. We need to continue to do more. We will do more, and the redevelopment commission is an extremely important tool that the city needs at this time.
Thank you. Due to our time constraints, in fact, we're going to try to get through a couple more questions here. We're going to hold off on rebuttals. If we have time, feel free to readdress those points again. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Thank you both. My name is Jody Sherman. My husband and I moved here 2.5 years ago. And one of the things that I'm just curious about is, we talk about this redevelopment, and you're going to have 2 different approaches on the answer to this, is there's an area, and I don't know the name of the streets, but it's behind the historic section. It's all these, I guess it's the housing city of the city housing of New Bern, where all these apartments are 90% abandoned.
Trent Court.
That's what it's called? Okay, so you talk about redevelopment and you talk about new business opportunities. Here is what I would consider, in most places I've lived, prime property. And I do understand that I guess it belongs to the, I don't know, the state. So, but for the past, since Florence, it's been abandoned. And so why can't the city of New Bern do something about this property? I mean, to me, with Kessler coming here, Union Park shouldn't even have been on the proposal. That piece of those properties there, I mean, to me, you could have put a beautiful restaurant, beautiful boutique hotel, you could have put affordable housing, and you would have solved a lot of problems.
Okay, we're going to take that as the question. What would you do with it, right?
What would you do with that?
All right, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, great question. Unfortunately, it is owned by HUD. It's owned by the Housing Authority of the City of New Bern, which has nothing to do. It's its own. And I see Kathy there because she's had a lot of experience with the Housing Authority. So unfortunately, I'm going to tell you, mismanagement, bad leadership. You know, the night of the storm, I'm on the phone to the Housing Authority director saying, "Get the people out." "Oh, don't worry, we've notified everybody," and ended up my son and Alderman Harris rescuing people out of the park as the water was flushing in. And you know, then the buildings are of course damaged. HUD says, "No more money, we're not giving you another dime." We've repaired them year after year after year of flood. So now you need to apply to get them taken down through FEMA. So this has been an ongoing process that they have to do. That is their property, they have to do it, it's their development plan. Well, the sticking point, I was at their meeting Monday night. I monthly go to the Housing Authority meeting because I think it's important enough to know what's going on in that community. And they're working with HUD, they're working with FEMA, and right now they have to, because it's in the historic district, they have to have a plan for demolition and a plan for what they're going to put back there. And until they have that plan, they can't get a demolition permit to take down the other buildings. So that's why they're sitting there abandoned. And yes, it's a great opportunity, but it is their property. They will make that decision, not the city of Newburgh, unfortunately, but that is their property.
Thank you.
Mr. Prill?
Yeah, not to reiterate what Sabrina just mentioned, because what she said is accurate. You know, the property is owned by HUD, so you're dealing with the federal government. Locally, it's the housing authority that has the responsibility to manage that property. Those units that were flooded as a result of Florence are going to be demolished. Is it taking a lot longer than any of us would like to see? Yes. And that's government bureaucracy, unfortunately. HUD, FEMA, they all have their rules, and you've got to follow those rules before action can be taken. The housing authority does have a plan. They're working that plan to try to get those units taken down, and they're not going to be rebuilt. If they're in the floodplain, that land is going to be just open space. It's not available for the city to develop. It's not available, you know, for a Kessler or any other, you know, developer coming in saying, oh, waterfront property, you know, we'd like to build a hotel there. No. It'll be open space, and it'll be great open space. The units that were not flooded, the housing authority will be fixing those units up. They will remain. There will be improvements made to them. The current tenants that live in those units, I believe, will have the opportunity to either stay there if they wanted to, or if they, you know, would like to relocate, they will have the opportunity to relocate. But my understanding is there will still be units there in Trent Court. And I see somebody kind of shaking their head saying no. So again, and I'll stand, you know, be corrected.
Correct.
Yeah, it's going to be a much different day. There's no more barrack-style housing. HUD won't fund barrack-style housing. HUD won't do that kind of, it's all mixed income type housing. So it'll be market rate, public housing, Section 8 housing, and you won't know who lives there because people want to be not defined by their address. And right now, when you say, I live in Trent Court, I live in Craven Terrace, your mindset is not good. So they want to live on a street, on an avenue, whatever. And so that is the thought process of HUD. It's a new way of doing business. It will dramatically change in there, but they have to be able to provide new housing. That's why we need to build new affordable housing so we can move the people from Trent Court to affordable housing, such as Carolina Avenue that was just built and some of the other places. So
I think one way of looking at it is that the current Trent Court project is a failed housing development.
It was a project.
Plain and simple, it's a failed housing development. They've learned their lesson, you know, they being HUD, they being the housing authority. They are working on developing this plan and moving forward with this plan to change that for the better for the residents, for the better for the community. It is taking longer than any of us would like to see, but again, that's government bureaucracy.
All right, Mr. Prill, thank you very much. We're going to have our last audience question.
So time?
We're going to make time.
Okay.
We're going to answer quickly.
If we can do 2 minutes, that would be great.
So I attended a forum that the city attorney spoke at when the whole Kessler thing was going on. And I asked about a master plan. And was told that one exists. But
Speak up.
Can you speak a little louder?
Sorry. I attended a forum that the city attorney gave when the Kessler thing all came out, and I asked about a master plan. And the city attorney said there is a master plan, but didn't seem to have any details and couldn't really share any of that with us, because I wanted to understand what was going on. And you made a comment just a few minutes ago about the city buying up a piece of property for a Pepsi museum. Yet we have lots of properties in town that are being sold for development purposes. So rather than go through a master plan discussion, and I can go read that, I'm interested in the city's plan or thought process around how they move these properties around, because that's not a zero-sum game, right? I mean, you're selling some properties for development purposes, but you're off buying up other properties for Pepsi museums using the city's money. So I'm just kind of interested in your view.
So the properties that we're selling off are properties that we gained through tax foreclosure, abandonment, what have you. So those are the properties we are selling off. So we have a land use plan. That's kind of what the master plan is. So those properties are being sold off. Our city properties, most of which we have, are used for parks and other places. And so we don't see that. This was a piece of property that was strategic to what we thought would be a good, viable tourism destination. We had the History Center across the street. That piece of property was there. We thought the Pepsi Museum, again, if it happens, and we're not there yet. That would be a strategic piece of property. You'd walk down Hancock to the Firemen's Museum, you'd walk to the Academy Museum, and then you have the depot. And there was the thought that this would help attract people down that street to the depot. Is that part of a master plan? Not necessarily, but it is looking at the strategic points along the way and how we can do this. So that's why originally we had looked at the Talbot's lot for potential of a Pepsi Museum, but some comments that we heard in the community, we thought this might be a better way, again, with that making Hancock almost like museum alley. And again, it's by talking to people, it's by listening to other communities and getting experience, but that's our master plan as far as the land use plan. Trying to keep it short.
Thank you very much. Mr. Prill, can we get a response in 2 minutes? And then I got one lightning question for both of you, and then we're going to hang out.
The city needs to have a master plan. The city manager made a comment to me, recently, that he's looking forward to the new Board of Aldermen, whatever way, shape, or form that new board is going to take. Because that new board needs to tackle putting together a master plan. And if the city does not have one, I thought the city had a master plan that was just old and collecting dust on a shelf somewhere, but I may be wrong on that. If we don't have one, shame on us. We should have one, because that's what is used to kind of guide decision-making now and every year, moving forward. I wasn't aware that we were looking at having a Pepsi Museum. I don't know whether there's been any discussion about that. I don't know whether that's a high priority when we've got a lot of other issues that money should be spent on and could be spent on. But apparently, amongst the current board, having a property that maybe could be used for a Pepsi Museum is a high priority. But I'm not aware that in the 7 or 8 years that we've been here, I haven't heard any discussion about that. So it kind of highlights what we started off talking about, is that decisions are being made without any input from the public. So you're not having the opportunity.
Sorry. I think we got it.
So you're not having the opportunity to provide input on these decisions before the decisions are made and the deal is done. And I think that's the wrong approach for the city.
All right, stay standing, Mr. Prill. Last question, all right? You got 1 minute on this. What commitment are you willing to make to being a responsive and active advocate on behalf of the residents of Ward 1? You got 1 minute.
What commitment?
What commitments are you willing to make?
The commitment that I'm going to make is to do my absolute best to bring the highest level of professionalism to the decision-making process of the mayor and board of aldermen. Right now, I think the current board is rather dysfunctional. The board, the composition of the board is going to change. It can change with individuals who are going to bring a new outlook on the future of New Bern, or it's going to remain essentially the same with the same mentality. So that's your decision to make, and I hope you make the right one.
Thank you, Mr. Prill. Alderman Bengel, same question. What commitment are you willing to make to being a responsive and active advocate on behalf of the residents of Ward 1?
Well, I'm going to continue to use my experience and my knowledge of this community, of where to get the answers to the questions, on where to get the solutions. I'm going to commit to continue to do that because my work has shown that I can get the job done. I know how to get the job done. I am responsive. I get calls all times of the day and night. I answer my phone calls. I am committed to doing the work of the citizens. It is a two-way street. We have to work with each other. If you have a problem, usually I don't hear from anybody unless there's a problem. And then I get the phone call and I go to work and I try to help you. So I'm committed. I'm committed to making the board work. I don't think we're dysfunctional. I believe that there's people that have different viewpoints, and sometimes they work with us and sometimes they don't. But I have been rock steady on fighting for my citizens, fighting for Ward 1, all apart. I understand it better than anybody. I know the communities, I know the people in them, and I would really appreciate that you let experienced leadership continue in Ward 1. It is the most important ward in the city. It drives economic development in this city and keeps that quality of life going. Most people who are here because of our beautiful downtown and our beautiful historic district, all our historic districts, Riverside and Ghent being part of that as well. And this just didn't happen overnight, but thank you. I respectfully ask for your vote and ask that you get out and vote early too.
Thank you.